I've been taking a survey, and this is my attempt to connect with older generations, okay? And this might apply more to the gentlemen than to the ladies. However, we did have at least one lady at the last Mass that answered yes to this. And my question is, how many of you as children sent away for a decoder ring in the mail? Anyone? Okay, I see some movement. I see, oh, we've got another lady here this morning. Good. You have the secret decoder rings. Oh, you do, huh? Now, you guys look too young to do the decoder ring thing, but no. All right. I never did the decoder ring. I think that was a little bit before my time. But I remember I had certain comic books where you had to have like a special, it was like a lens you had to look through to be able to read certain things and figure certain things out and solve certain clues or puzzles. What am I getting at? That's a really good question. I don't know. I'm just kind of bored that I get a little nostalgic. No. What a lot of people treat the Bible like you need some kind of super decoder ring in order to figure it out, especially when it comes to these end times, if you will, prophecies of Jesus. And I wouldn't be surprised if right now, at this very moment, on TV somewhere in the world, there is a televangelist trying to tell people how to tell when the end of the world is happening. One time I ran into someone at a Sam's Club, and he started telling, Father, I have all this evidence that this seal's been broken, and this seal's been broken, and this seal's been broken. He goes, would you like to see what I have? I said, no, not really. I said, because that's not what it's about. And Jesus himself, after saying all of the things he says here in Mark's gospel, he ends it with saying, but of the day or the hour, no one knows. But, I see some that go as far as say, yes, but he didn't say you won't know the month or the year. I'm like, I think you're missing the point. The whole point of this passage in the Gospel of Mark, as we're concluding Jesus' lessons on discipleship, is that Jesus is saying that discipleship is about being now, being here, being in the present. And Jesus says here in this passage from the 13th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel that this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Now, what are the things that Jesus predicts in this 13th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel? We don't get all of them in the pericope that we have for us today, so we kind of have to go back a little bit. The first thing he predicts is the destruction of the temple. Now, for first century Jews, and for Jews period, the temple was everything. First of all, it was an architectural marvel, the most magnificent building any of them were ever going to get a chance to see in their lifetime. It was absolutely breathtaking to behold. And then Jesus predicts that one day stone won't remain among stones. If you could just imagine being in front of any beautiful, magnificent church, magnificent cathedral like St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and your tour guide says, and by the way, soon, brick won't lay upon brick here. It's like, wow, that's pleasant, thank you. I want my money back. And also, it meant to them an end to the religious ceremonies of the time, which was already controversial at the time of Jesus because the Ark of the Covenant was not in the temple. Yet the sacrifices were still going on there. And even among Judaism, you had the Pharisees that were more anti-temple, and certain parties, the Sadducees, that were more pro-temple. And so you had this, there was kind of a argument between the two already. And so this would mean a complete end to the temple, which is a great question of identity for the Jewish people. Many of the Jewish people today are still, some of them are still calling for a third temple to be built. Some Christians are also calling for a third temple to be built because, again, they're using their decoder rings and trying to figure out the book of Revelation and have missed the point that we are the temple of God. The church is the temple of God. I'll talk more about that here in a moment. The siege of Jerusalem that happened in 70 AD, so that was not one generation past the time of Jesus, was terrible. We talk about the reality of war today, and war today is terrible. Right? We have these weapons of mass destruction and things that we didn't have before, but that did not prevent people from doing terrible things in the first century. And I was reading this week, Josephus's account of the siege of Jerusalem that took place in 70 AD, and it was terrible. I mean, he said there were bodies stacked in the streets, that people were so hungry that, I'll be careful because I know there's young children here, but people were so hungry that they resorted to cannibalism, that people were literally swallowing gold in order to try to run. So when people were captured and killed, the soldiers would be searching for that swallowed gold. So if you can just imagine these terribly gruesome, horrific sights, people crucified to send a message. I mean, and of course the smells and the sights and the sounds that went with all of these things. This had to seem to the Jewish people like the end of the world. And Josephus even describes that there was astrological phenomena going on in the skies at the time, things like stars moving around and eclipses and so on and so forth. And so, of course, they were interpreting that in light of what they saw. Like many of the world, I was up really late on Friday night for apparently no good reason. But after that was over, I was out on my porch and I saw a falling star. Now I know I'm hip and up on things, so I know there was a meteor shower, even though the apex of it was a couple of days ago. So I see that falling star. It was cool, but I knew there was a meteor shower. But you can understand, in the first century, they didn't know there was a meteor shower. People didn't even know what meteor showers were. So you see stars start to fall down from the sky, it kind of freaks you out. Especially if, I think I maybe heard my grandfather talk about seeing that one time, but I don't really know. It was scary to these folks. And Jesus is telling them that these things are going to, so first he says the temple's going to be destroyed. Then he says there's going to be tribulation, there's going to be persecutions among the Christians, which happened right around the same time with the rise of Caesar Nero to power. And this continued, of course, for the first 4 centuries of Christianity, all the way, and of course it's made a resurgence. There are actually more martyrs in the past 100 years than there were in the past 2,000 years of Christianity. And he said the other thing is that false teachers are going to come and teach in his name. The people are going to claim they have the teachings of Christ, but are going to teach apart from his authority. All of that came to pass within the generation of Jesus. The temple was destroyed. And Christ, it says, you'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds. The clouds were a sign of the Shekinah, of God's presence among his people, God's presence in the temple. So Jesus is showing himself even here to be the new temple. In fact, we see Jesus is described when it says in the book of Revelation that God's temple could be seen in the sky. It's Jesus they're looking at. Jesus himself is the new temple. This is why Jesus himself declared an end to the temple when he went in there and kicked out all the people that were selling the doves. And it wasn't just because there were abuses. Those things were necessary for the operation of the temple. Jesus was declaring the temple's over. It's been fulfilled, and we saw that so beautifully explained in our second reading, which came from the letter of St. Paul to the Hebrews, that Christ is the new temple. In fact, it says the Son of Man is going to send his angels to the ends of the earth. Angels is the word for messenger, so we could also use that as not just the supernatural creature angel, but as evangelists. So it's talking about the proclamation of the gospel going out to the ends of the earth. So Jesus is predicting the birth, if you will, of the church that stands as the new temple. And he's telling people that bad things are going to happen. Absolutely terrible things are going to happen. But pay attention, because you know when these things happen that I'm near. Now, I think there's 2 lessons that Jesus is giving us in a take-home for this, and none of them involve a decoder ring. Again, none of them involve trying to scramble and find the right passage to see exactly what month and year Jesus is going to come back. Firstly, this should be a call for each and every one of us, especially as our church year winds down and the readings become more eschatological. That's a theological SAT word for you all this morning, which means concerning the last things. And the last things are death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Those are realities that we're all going to face. We're all going to die one day. We're all going to face judgment one day. And then in the end, our eternal decision will be either heaven or hell. And so I think what the Lord is giving us is the opportunity now to stop, which is good, because if you notice that this time of year gets faster and faster every year, I don't even know what holiday we're getting ready for anymore. Apparently, this is the time of year where we sell "Oh Hallow Thanks Christopalooza." We don't even get to slow down and enjoy each holiday anymore. It's all bleh. But the Lord's reminding us to stop. And, I think a lot of these, I talk about these preachers, these people that become obsessed with the end times. And I think a lot of times that's because they feel like, well, if we talk about the end times, it'll motivate people to change. It'll motivate people to examine themselves and perhaps repent, right? Have you seen the signs before? Like, repent, the end is near. But the reality is that most of us in this church, except for the young voices that I'm hearing right now, most of us within 70 years from now are going to meet our Maker. And that is not a very long time from now. The day of judgment is at hand for a good number of us. And so this is the opportunity to examine my life. Am I living my life as a disciple of Jesus Christ? Am I centered completely and totally on what he has called me to do? Am I taking my place in his kingdom on this earth, which is his church, so that I can be part of the church triumphant forever in heaven? Am I putting off the sacrament of confession? Have I not been as serious about my faith as I should? Am I learning, or at least trying to learn, every day to put my faith and trust more and more in Jesus Christ? Because judgment's coming. So the first thing we need to recognize is that when that day comes, we better be in a state of grace. If we've been to mortal sin without confession, we're in trouble when the judgment comes. So it's a good time to look at our hearts, look at our lives, and say, okay, let's go to confession. Let's place myself back in God's grace. I want to take my place in his kingdom. This is what Jesus is telling us. I'm near. I'm standing at the gates. But also, at the same time, as it gives us pause to stop, examine ourselves, reflect, and challenge us, it also gives us a message of deep and profound hope. Because if you're saying to the people that, like, look, when you're going through these terrible sieges, when there's bodies stacked outside your doors, and you're dealing with all this war, and all these terrible things are going on around you, I'm here. I'm at the gates. We're ready. The victory is ours. When we're dealing with crazy things like famine, economic hardships, all kinds of crises, political unrest, and war, Christ is saying, don't worry. I've won the victory. I'm here. But even deeper in all of that, he also says that to each and every one of us in our personal lives, no matter what our personal struggles that we're going through are, anxiety, depression, fear, feelings of inadequacy, family drama, family struggle, death, illness, loss, sadness, all of those things, Christ is reminding us, even when this is happening, I'm standing at the gates. I've got this. We're going to get you through this. The Christ event is an event that takes place as a whole. His incarnation, his passion, his death, his resurrection, and his second coming. He has changed the world forever. Christ has won the victory. He is the one who was, who is, and who is to come. And this, of course, is the great mystery we celebrate every time we gather for the Eucharist. So this Eucharist today is to remind us that judgment is coming, that Christ is coming, that he's going to come and claim his church for his own. So one, we need to make sure that we're taking our place among his elect. We're taking our place in his church. We're being faithful and fruitful disciples of Jesus Christ, living every day as best we can according to his will so that we may remain firm in his promise. And so that one day we as the church on earth may be called to join the church in heaven. Because in heaven there's only the church, my brothers and sisters. There's only God's elect. Only those who he has called and have said yes to his kingdom. And then finally, he gives us that message of hope. That message that though things may seem difficult and grim, don't worry, I'm at the gates. We've got this. In St. Mark's gospel, as in the others, at the moment of crucifixion, do you know what happens? The sun goes dark. There's an eclipse of the sun, more of this astrological phenomena that's taking place in the skies. But to remind us that even in those moments when life seems the darkest, even in that moment where it seems like just for that instant that Satan won, he didn't. In fact, it's in that moment that Christ defeated death, that he destroyed death, and that he conquered sin forever. So likewise, the moments in our life that seem dark, dim, and bleak, we're given that eternal depth of hope. Hope, the theological virtue by which we expect from God eternal life and the grace necessary to attain it. Christ is calling us right now, calling us to be more faithful and fruitful disciples of him, and calling us to take hope in him, hope in his reign, hope in his victory over every kind of nonsense that this world might spew out. And the promise that his elect, his disciples, his sheep, his brothers and sisters will have victory over even death itself in his kingdom that has no end.